In this video, we're going to begin to explore the idea of graphing and covariation. And covariation, again, is when you're tracking two variables at the same time. So what's happening to both the variables as they relate to one another. And so we want to look at, and I'm going to use blue for my input colors throughout this entire course. And so the input, which is also called the independent variable or the independent quantity, this is always along the horizontal axis. And, and in this case, it is signified by the temperature in degrees Celsius. And as always, we also need a letter that goes with that, a reasonable letter. So we're going to call this T. And then my output, which I'm going to do in green, is called the dependent quantity or the dependent variable. And that is always along the vertical axis. Okay, so in this case, this is the altitude. And again, we need a letter. So we'll give it comma and we'll call it A. All right, the other thing to note in terms of input, where we might find inputs in a table, the input is listed first on top or on the left-hand side of the table, whereas the output would be labeled secondly. And so right now we're just going to look at graphs, but we're going to look at all of those different ways to represent this. So let's now look at what the table or what the graph is actually telling us. So we have the temperature in degrees Celsius, we have the altitude in kilometers, and the altitude is measured from the Earth's surface. So in other words, the Earth's surface is at altitude 0. All right, so we're going to first concentrate on the input. So we're going to do the horizontal axis here, which means we're going to have the input quantity. And so we know that T is the temperature in degrees Celsius. Okay, so this we're defining our variable, and our variable is the letter T, and that's measuring the temperature in degrees Celsius. We want to know what is the practical significance of positive values, so these values are on the right-hand side. So the practical significance would be temperatures above, so temperatures above 0 degrees Celsius. And then the negative values would be temperatures, so all these values to the left. So this is the temperature below 0 degrees Celsius. And then it says how many degrees Celsius are represented between the tick marks on the horizontal axis. So we can look at the major tick marks, so the 20, 40, but between them, these major tick marks are our smaller tick marks. And so we can count here and see that halfway would be 10 degrees Celsius. So it appears to be that the horizontal axis is being measured by in 5 degrees Celsius. So 5, 10, 15, 20. So we know that how many degrees Celsius are represented here with each tick mark. So it's 5 degrees Celsius. Likewise, in question number 2, we're going to answer the same type of questions, except this time we're going to look at the vertical axis. And so the vertical axis is the output axis. And we know that the output axis was labeled A for the altitude in kilometers. And so, again, we're defining the variable. And again, our variable has to have a reasonable letter, whatever it is we are talking about, whatever we're defining, and then the unit of measurement. So the positive values are going to be altitudes. Let me try this again. Altitudes above, we can either say Earth's surface, That's one way of writing it. When we talk about the negative values, so I'm going to write it the other way here. Altitudes below or maybe under 0 kilometers. And then this time we want to look at the tick marks again. So we go, the major tick marks are counting by tens, but within each one we have smaller tick marks. And so if this middle tick mark is, in this case, it would be 5 or 15. So in between would be 2.5. So if we go counting from 0 here, 2.5, 5, 7.5, and then 10. So these are 2.5 kilometers. And again, the vertical axis, that means up and down, whereas our horizontal axes is our left and right. And remember, horizontal axis is our input variable. And our vertical axis is our output variable.